Good evening. So I was on X today and I'm seeing all the local politicians starting to campaign. They're going after these investors, these institutional investors, the Wall Street money going in and buying up all the houses and creating home prices through the roof that no one can afford their home. So it's been a non-issue up until their campaign season, and now suddenly it's investors are the problem or realtors are the problem for these high home prices. The reality is they made starter homes illegal. So we need to make starter homes legal again. And what do I mean by that? You cannot, if you go back to your grandparents or my grandparents' generation, and let's say it's the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, young couple or whatever, they get married, they go and they build a house, right? They might have some friends, they build it on the lot together, right? They can do this manually. You can't really do that today, right? So they were able to do that. One is land prices were a little more affordable, right? It was you could buy a lot and you could clear it and build your own house. The houses were simple design, simple construction, 2x4 framing. You might have had the 17-inch block wall or the 8-inch block that you used, in the 1940s. So you could do that manually. You could build that by hand, or it was relatively inexpensive to have that construction done. It was simple construction. So 2x4 framing, masonry block walls for the basement. You ran 60 amp fuse boxes. You didn't have much electrical. You didn't have too many circuits going into your kitchen. Real basic electrical at the time. Not a lot of money went into that. Very simple home style, simple construction. It was affordable, and then we slowly started adding building codes. But it didn't happen until about the 1990s when things got out of control. So we improved some technologies. We went into the 50s. The basement got a little more waterproofing. You started putting tar on the exterior of the foundation walls. You improve some of the stick framing styles, but it was still the basic materials. Some of the inside, you save some money on the lath and plaster. You went up to using the plaster board, which was what later became sheetrock, and then lathed over that, and then your plaster. You're still using single pane windows. The construction was simple, and it got better and it improved. And then the 60s, it improved even further. The houses grew up a little bit in size as family sizes got bigger. The 70s, we started going into better design on like a split entry. You could reduce, you only had half the basement. You're still down below frost value, but you reduced a large cost on putting in the foundation. So that kind of happened through time. And then in the 1990s, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the era of big business. You started getting a lot of new building codes. Or maybe it was the era of the green environment movement that started creating this. So we got rid of the 2x4 walls and we went to 2x6. And the only reason we went to 2x6 is so you can get additional insulation in there. So in the 1920s, they wouldn't have insulated it. Maybe in the 30s or 40s, they would have put some sewn newspapers or stapled some newspapers in the walls. And then they probably would have put some fiberglass insulation or wool insulation back in the 1950s and 60s. And then, we kind of went to the fiberglass in the 70s. So then by the time in the 90s, we went to 2x6 construction. So we went from R11 wall insulation to R19 to R21 insulated walls. And then we put in 6 mil vapor barrier over the top of that, and we sealed that house tight. And then we tarred the bottom of that to the floor and then up to the ceiling. And then we sealed around all the electrical boxes on the outside of the wall so no air penetration went out. So suddenly we're living in a balloon in the 90s, right? So as you're breathing in the balloon, all the humidity, moisture builds up on the walls. And if you're in a cold climate like Minnesota, that moisture condenses on anything that's cold. So any little pinprick that breaks that balloon wall, that moisture is going to suck out there, and now your walls are going to start rotting out from the inside. Okay, so then they have to learn that you have to do flashing, better flashing. You have to have a watershed. You're going to need tie back on the exterior of the house. That'll allow the house to breathe better. Now you got to put in machines to pump fresh air in and exchange the moist, dirty air that you're breathing because you're living inside of a balloon. So now you have a special equipment to pump in fresh air. So now you're living inside of a machine. Now you need bath vents to push out all that moist air out of the bathroom. And then obviously we add more electrical gadgets. Now we need, whatever, 6 circuits going into the kitchen. We need GFI everywhere. We need to start running 200 amp services. We got to spray our rim joists with spray foam to seal that even tighter so we're not losing any moisture and rotting out the rim joists. Just the arc fault breakers that they just added on the electrical code and the GFCI breakers. I used to be able to replace a panel box on a house I'm fixing up for about $2,000. That cost has gone to about $5,000. Okay, so a $3,000 difference doesn't sound like a lot of money. It is. It is a lot of money. You start going 3,000 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 here. It adds up fast. So that's where house prices are getting out of control. And then, you got things that you don't even think about, like handrails, right? So some kid got his head stuck in between the little balusters on the handrail. So now you got to go balusters that are like, you can't fit a 3-inch sphere through their sphere or ball. So a kid's not going to get his head stuck in there. You go into a house built in the 20s and, might be 18 inches. A kid can walk right through and fall right out. Well, they survived, but so now we got to do a lot more. We got to have continuous rails so you never have to take your hand off the handrail, and that's a lot more labor, a lot more material. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it starts to add up. You got hardwire smoke detectors, hardwire carbon monoxide detectors. You got low E argon glass in the windows. You got the thermal or triple pane glass, a lot of different technology going in. You're not doing fireplaces anymore. You're doing, when you do a fireplace, you're doing a sealed unit. So you're not losing heat up the chimney. So gas fireplaces. We dodged a bullet here recently. We were almost had a code pass that was going to require fire sprinklers go into houses. So now you're going to have to bring in a giant water main to supply water to the house to put out a fire in case there's a fire in the house. And they were estimating this to be about $20,000 per house. That's a big number on a house. That's a very big number on a house. And, it's ideal if its house catches on fire, but you hit diminishing return. You got homeless people all over. Yeah, it'd be nice if houses didn't burn down, but you're still safer than living out on the streets with all the homeless people. So how are these codes created? Well, there's a couple different reasons, right? It's a bunch of do-good stuff, and it's well intended in the beginning. We need some safety, we need some common practices on, so you know how a house is built, and it's structurally sound, and you're not going to have things collapse. But what it's turned into is these corporations, manufacturers, for example, the NEC, Electrical Code, they have code making panels. And they have manufacturers, inspectors, installers, testing labs and special experts that are on these panels, and they're the ones who come up with the codes for the electrical. And it's not just the electrical codes that do this. So basically, if you're a manufacturer, you get on these panels and you're going to try to get your product made to code. So now your product has to be used in every house that's being built. So this is big business. This is not safety anymore. This is how to increase your revenue for your manufacturing business. If you can get this stuff passed and put into codes. So that's kind of what these codes have turned into be. And now that's from the industry perspective. Now, if you're sitting at the city level, these code enforcements are, they're a tax. When I pull a building permit, it's going to vary and range from city to city. So I pulled a roofing permit in a metro city and I paid, what was it? It was like $650. Okay, it's just tear off an old roof and put a new roof on. The building inspector never even went out to the house. I had the roof torn off. I took photos of the decking. I took photos of the felt and I emailed those in. And then put the shingles down and then the flashing on and then the shingles down. And then he signed off on the building permit after paying that $650. Never once stood on the property, didn't even drive by and look at the roof. Okay, they collected a tax. So, I know they can't be everywhere, but, really $650. So then another area that's further out, same kind of house, roughly the same size roof, pull another roofing permit up there, $75. And they went out and they looked at the roof. So some of these cities are using it as a tax revenue stream. So this goes into cost of housing. You don't think $650 on a roof inspection on a new house is going to make or break the house. No, but you start adding a few of those in, and pretty soon $10,000-$20,000 adds up very fast. So that's just it from the construction standpoint. The local builders association here did a little study here back in, I think it was 2018 or 2019, and they called it legalized starter homes, and that's kind of where I plagiarized this from, is because it is illegal to build these homes now. If you wanted to go out and let's just say your dad or your grandpa built this nice little starter home when they got married and started their family, you can't do it. You can't build a house that was built in the 70s. It's illegal. You can't use a 2x4 framing. You can't use a single pane windows. You can't probably even use the felt that they used on the roof. You've got to do all the new energy codes. You got to do all the new electrical codes. You got to do all the new plumbing codes. You got to do the insulation and the framing. You got to go to 2x6 framing. And this thing just starts compounding on the costs. So you cannot build an affordable house today. You cannot build a starter home. So that is the issue. It's not these companies coming in and investing in rental properties. It's not from the realtors charging a buyer broker fee of 2.5 or 3%. It's these building codes. It's the land costs. So this study kind of compares this, and this really illustrates this. So in this study, they compared a home built in, there's a metro area of the Twin Cities called Lake Elmo. It's a suburb on the east side. $47,000 more to build a home there than the identical home 10 miles away across the river in Hudson. That's almost $50,000 difference. Just moving out of one city municipality area and going to a different one outside of the state of Minnesota, 10 miles away. And the cost differences were caused by land, infrastructure, and regulatory costs. So regulatory costs are those building permit fees I'm talking about. Those play a huge role. If you've got 30 grand in building fees, sack and whack, that's sewer access and water access. That's a big nut of that house. So using the same payment schedule, so you build in Wisconsin or you build in this Lake Elmo city, $47,000 difference. It's going to take you an additional 7 years to pay that house off in Minnesota versus Wisconsin. So now you got a new home. We would go to the west metro of the Twin Cities, and that's a little suburb called Victoria. It's way out there. It's an exurb. It's west of the Twin Cities quite a ways. So it's 25% more. This is 2019 to build a similar home built the same builder. So it's a national home builder like a Lennar or Pulte or somebody. They can build that same home in southwest suburbs of Chicago for $82,000 less than they can build it in that suburb of Minnesota. And that's all just the regulatory costs, which are the building permit fees, infrastructure, and land. Okay, so why is land so expensive in the Twin Cities? Well, that's also government regulation. It's called Met Council. They're going to restrict suburban sprawl by doing what they call the MUSA line. So you're not allowed to develop land that's not within that MUSA boundary. MUSA is the water and sewer connection, because we have regional water and sewer. We don't have individual water and sewer systems. We go in as a Twin Cities as a whole, 13 county metro area, and we share a regional water and sewer system. So you can't build outside of that. So that's why the land prices are driven up, because they don't want suburban sprawl. They want higher density, they being the government. So they want to keep this contained and to build up versus out. Now the consumer wants their house. They want their bigger house, and but the zoning is being forced into high density housing, and that's one reason we get a lot of these apartment buildings. So this one's changed since then, but back in 2018, 2019, We were one of the highest gaps between existing home price and new construction. It was $142,000. That has closed substantially. I don't know what the new one is, but I know the existing home supply went up. I started buying as many as I could. I started investing in real estate when I was seeing the difference. You can't build most of these houses, even now with the high house prices, you cannot build a new house for that price. So it's a no-brainer to go buy a house now, even if with high interest rates, because you cannot replace that house. If you are going to replace a similar house, it's going to cost you more, and it's going to be in a further out suburb. So it's still a tremendous value. So Midwestern housing markets like Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis, and Nashville all build between 50 to 80% of their new homes at 325,000 or less. This is 2019 numbers. And our region builds less than a third of our homes at 325,000 or less. And that's going to be probably closer to like 425 now. So it's our land cost. It's our the regional city sewer, city water that we restricted land development is why these house prices are going gangbusters. So all these building codes, zoning, regulations, building permit fees, SAC and WAC, that's sewer access, water access fees, all contribute to a much higher cost to build housing. But then the same politicians that are clamoring for re-election here and caused a lot of this, may not be directly or sometimes indirectly, are blaming a company that owns less than one, or investors that own less than 1% of the housing stock for increasing the house prices. No, what we need to do is start making it legal to build starter homes again, period. We have a lack of inventory for starter homes. The millennial generation needs starter homes. They need to be able to get into housing just like their previous generations did, back in the 70s, the 60s, 50s, 20s, all the way to the 1900s, to be able to build their home and start building equity and building their future. So that's what I got. A little bit of a rant, but that kind of set me off this morning on watching these politicians try to capitalize on this for their own personal gains on re-election. So have a good night.